Frida Kahlo was a Mexican artist known for her deeply personal and vibrant paintings that often explored themes of identity and the human condition. Born in Coyoacan, Mexico, she endured a difficult childhood, including a bout with polio and a severe bus accident at the age of 18, which left her with lifelong physical challenges. These struggles led her to create iconic self-portraits that expressed her emotional and physical suffering, along with her strong sense of Mexican culture. Today, Kahlo is celebrated not only as a pioneering feminist and icon of resilience, but also as a symbol of queerness and Mexican pride. Kahlo's legacy endures, making her one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. And today, I'm gonna dive into her day-to-day life and her creative routine. I'm not the first person to think up this video format. Plenty of other people who have tried different artists and other people's, routine, which is a very loose term in this case. I particularly really enjoy Christiane Jones' series where she tries different authors' writing routine. So yeah, if you like this, I really recommend those. And that was what inspired me to do this. This video is more about talking about Frida, learning about her as an artist, becoming the icon that we know her as today. I'm gonna go with a routine that I found from her time when she was married to Diego Rivera, so later in her life. And it said that they started the day with a late breakfast where they sat down to plan who needed a chauffeur, who needed to go where, and what was happening that day or that week. Then after the late breakfast, Diego went to his studio. Frida would paint in the afternoon. In the evenings, they would often have extravagant dinner parties. So I think that feels important is Frida's style and makeup choices. I read in the book that she wasn't the only young Mexican woman who accentuated her unibrow or her mustache. It seems like young girls Frida's age did this. I assume that this is a response or counter-response to westernized beauty ideal at the time. So yeah, makeup-wise, it would feel kind of performery to do a unibrow just because I'm doing a video about Frida Kahlo, because I don't have one. But I'm going to take the idea of accentuating a flaw wildly using quotation marks. I'm not a big fan of my face. I have bad skin or uneven skin texture. I have hooded eyes. They kind of slant downward. I've always felt like I look really tired. Mostly when I wear makeup, put makeup on the upper lid because it makes my eyes look less downward slanted. It's so ingrained in me. I've been doing this since I was a teenager. Never do I put makeup on my lower lash line. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I've seen that puppy eyeliner trend which accentuates the downward slant. It's really interesting looking at Frida, from a beauty perspective today, because I feel like a lot of the things that she stands for in that regard is what has become, it's dipped in and out of mainstream for the past few years. She truly was ahead of her time. Being proud of your identity, celebrating diversity, and I think that's one of the things that has made her into this icon that we think of her as today. Frida Kahlo's personal style is very recognizable and has since become iconic. She often wore traditional Tijuana dresses adorned with bright colors, intricate embroidery, and elaborate accessories like necklaces, flowers, and headpieces, creating a striking and memorable look. As someone who's interested in vintage, historic fashion, and just love the look of traditional folk styles, I would really like to find a balance in my own style where I'm able to incorporate elements of these without it feeling forced or like a costume. It's not often I take time to experiment, so I pulled out a bunch of my most eccentric items and just tried a bunch of things. And it turns out putting together an outfit is hard. Also, I wanted to feel comfortable, so yeah, I went with something that isn't groundbreaking, but I opted for comfort today. At least I'm doing something different than I normally do. It is 11. I'm a breakfast person, so this is my own personal hell. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, I was pretty set on trying an actual recipe that Frida would have cooked. And this book is full of recipes that are unfortunately also full of ingredients that I can't get a hold of. Found a bunch of different recipes and suggestions for Mexican breakfast foods, and I'm gonna try and do something called molete, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm really sorry to all the Mexican viewers. Refried beans, some cheese, some pico de gallo. It's supposed to be on bread rolls. Unfortunately, I'm gluten intolerant, so decent bread rolls, hard to find. I'm just gonna use the bread that works for me. Gluten-free / Swedish adaptation of moletes. Okay, so Frida would obviously be painting in her studio, and while we have a shared office space, this is a nicer space to be painting. Just kind of work away at a self-portrait, because that's what Frida would paint. I don't think I've painted a self-portrait since I was a teenager. No, that's not right. I have actually no idea of where to start other than my face. That's what a self-portrait is. And Frida would probably have a mirror. I'm going to use a selfie. Do something about identity, which is a kind of a difficult subject. I feel like it's really difficult to like define yourself. When you come from a mixed European family and everything that comes with that, there's a lot to unpack. Another thing that I've come across in doing my research about Frida, I feel like there's a lot of reference to her pain. That there's pain in her art, that her art is solely about pain, and that through most of her life she was living in pain. I'm not denying that, but it almost feels like a kind of ableism. Frida Kahlo often incorporated indigenous Mexican symbols such as vibrant flowers, animals, and religious imagery in her art. Kahlo's use of traditional clothing in her self-portraits, particularly the Tijuana dress, was a statement of pride in her indigenous heritage. She also frequently included elements of Mexican folk art and pre-Columbian traditions. Though the mainstream interpretation mainly focuses on personal pain, there are some art historians and researchers that suggest she uses herself, her multicultural family history, and personal pain as tools to discuss and explore Mexican identity post-revolution. Historically, though, female artists have often been reduced to not being able to paint beyond the female domain of the home, so it is not surprising that this interpretation has also been placed on Frida. There's a lot of little comments in the biography about Frida's mental health, how she acts like an insane woman and erratic. But again, there's so many variables that could inform. If she lived in a different time, culture, she went through quite a bit of trauma as a child. Parents weren't necessarily very loving. And, there's all these different things that I'm sure people can relate to in different ways. And she lived in a time of revolution. And I feel like also people forget that this specific time that she was living in, 1907 till the 60s, is a time where in the West, the female ideal is a very passive person. And Frida wasn't passive. She very much took action. I think it's interesting to analyze these things and try to look, at a person in history or historic event and try and look at them from a different perspective. Maybe add some nuance. Frida did live with a lot of pain. She had polio as a child, which left her with weakened muscles in her legs. But because of this, she was very active. She moved around, she exercised a lot throughout her teens, specifically in order to counteract her weakness and not be seen as an invalid. Then in her early 20s, she had a horrific accident. There was a collision between a bus and a tram in which she basically was impaled on a metal spear that went through her hip bone and broke her spine, and several other injuries. This was a pivotal moment in her life. She had been not officially engaged, but she'd been in a relationship with a man who was on this bus and experienced this crash together with her. And after that, he was so traumatized, he moved away and the relationship kind of fizzled out. Her parents were so shocked by the accident that they didn't come to see her in the hospital. Only her sister came at first, when she needed support the most. And there's a lot of letters from this time where she pleads to people to come and see her. She's very much alone in the hospital. And in this time of bed rest for a year, she starts to paint. There's a famous quote of hers about her art, and I'm paraphrasing now. "I paint myself because it's the subject that I know best, because I've spent so much time alone." Obviously nowhere near finished. I really got into flow and I actually had a lot of fun making it, so most important thing. In preparation for this video, I read these 2 books and also a few research articles, just because I wanted to get kind of a broad view of Frida and her place in art. And what I found interesting is that a lot of the sources online refer to the same source, which is this book, which was written in the 80s. So this is decades after Frida passed away. Sure, it's based on diary entries and letters and things like that, but still it's now a 40-year-old source. I think it's interesting, and I think that's important to keep in mind. The time in which it was written is very much colored by, a westernized person's perspective. Much more interesting to read the book by Diego Rivera's daughter, so Frida's stepdaughter, because it's a person who was close to Frida telling little snippets of Frida's life and their shared experience together. I also found there to be some strange comments in the biography, just like random things about her mental health and specifically her pain. One research paper that I found that was actually written by a Swedish art researcher, not debunks, but she questions this notion that Frida only painted her own pain, and that everything, like a lot of other people previously have said, that Frida mostly painted about the accident and about her pain and like confronting womanhood. And previous people have talked about how Frida's art is a reflection on her pain, her personal pain, her relationships and her madness and the repercussions of her accident. But the Swedish researcher suggests that there's more symbolism in her art than other people have attributed, and that there's actually more about Mexico and the Mexican liberation and the revolution, and that her self-portraits are more a reflection of her relationship with Mexico and the culture and the time that she lives in than it is solely a reflection of her own pain, which I think is interesting. In the process of making this video, I had a freaking blast. So much fun. It was really interesting learning about this amazing woman. It was really fun getting better acquainted with her art, and there's genuinely some things that I'm taking with me that I've learned in the process of this. Not necessarily her routine. I'm a morning person. By the time she's had breakfast, my energy for the day is gone. Neither is painting all afternoon. I'm not a full-time artist. Something that I found really endearing, that I was aware of before coming into this, is obviously cultural pride. We know that Frida was very proud of her Mexican heritage, and she's known to be wearing Mexican clothing and having grown up during the Mexican Revolution. When she talked about her birth date later in life she would say that she was born the same year as the liberation, as a way to like build this legend around herself. The way that she handles her cultural identity and the way that she's using her background and ancestry to tell stories and pull symbolism from, find that really inspiring, and I guess that's a huge part of why she's become such an important icon, especially in Mexico. Personally, without going into it too much, I come from a mixed multicultural family, some Hungarian and some German, and obviously born and raised in Sweden. Yeah, I've had phases where I was really proud of it. Then, you grow up and everything is just awkward. You have to over-explain everything. And I guess my video diving into folklore is kind of moving in that area. Another thing that's really spoke to me is her individuality. Similarly to cultural identity, as an adult, I haven't really allowed myself individuality. And I'm moving into a space where I'm okay with being seen as a weirdo. I think there's something about making art and you have to kind of just accept yourself and your interests and your little oddities. You discover yourself through making art and being creative. Being yourself, your true genuine self, is an act of creativity. And I feel like life is a constant rediscovery of the personal self. I also really enjoy the meeting friends aspect, and socializing gives you so much. I'm not very good at socializing, I get drained very easily, but something about deriving inspiration from everyday things that might seem mundane. What is life if not to share with people? The biggest takeaway that I've learned from Frida, I guess, from learning about Frida, is that life is happening now. Sometimes life takes a different turn and you're not in charge of the time that you live in, even if it's painful sometimes. We have to make the most of it and have no regrets. I hope this video was enjoyable. I hope you learned something. I hope this was a nice tribute to an artist. It was really important to me, or it became very important. I think this was a different video in my mind, and then it became something that was bigger. I hope it was insightful. I hope you learned something, and maybe you found something that you want to try in your creative life or your creative process. If you have any questions, you can write them below, or if you would like to see me do another artist's routine, I have some in mind, but I'm happy to listen to requests. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I hope to see you back here soon. Take care.